I think that the division has evolved quite a lot, in fact a great deal, within the BPS itself, within its own organisation. My question would be is how much it has evolved in the field. I work in the field. I'm also qualified I'm accredited as a psychotherapist, I'm accredited as a BACP registered supervisor. So I work I have colleagues they're not all in the BPS, my colleagues, they're all over the place. And in they're psychotherapists, some of them call themselves still very proudly counsellors. I think as far as the general public is concerned, I don't think counselling psychology has made it yet. I mean, when I see clients, I consult to organisations, very rarely do I get asked, we want you because you're a counselling psychologist. If I ask who they want help from, very rarely would they say a counselling psychologist. But within the field of the BPS, and I've been very impressed today particularly by the chair you have now, there is a sense that it's at last really being recognised as a solid, stable speciality which has a lot to offer, perhaps more to offer than the other divisions in some ways, because it's so broad.
I think the division and the field have evolved relatively coincidentally in that they have started from a wish to have something which was truly intersubjective, that considered the other person within therapeutic endeavour, and I suppose had a sort of social justice agenda, although it wouldn't have been called that back in the day. This was in distinction to some of our colleagues who were doing a more sort of reductionist and psychometric-based approach to applied psychology. Since that time, of course, I think the change in applied psychology has meant that there's increasingly little to distinguish between the various branches of applied psychology, such that it's not unusual for counselling psychologists to use psychometrics or do forensic or to be involved in health, for example, and similarly for any of our colleagues, for clinical psychologists, to be aware of intersubjectivity and those sorts of elements. So I suppose it's a sort of coming together into a field of applied psychology, I would think would be the most significant change.
I think the evolution has been like adolescence. I think the division is now 25, and that's the point at which people begin to really grow up. Theoretically it's 18, but who wants to be an adult at 18? 25, you're beginning to get your grips and to experience what is required of you, as well as what you believe in and what you want to happen. So it is the time, I think, when we're ready, or the division is ready, within the BPS, to grow, to form relationships with other important allies, because the time for being pioneers is an exciting, wonderful time in itself. But then there's a time to settle into where you are and to make an impact. That usually takes a lot of slog, a lot of reciprocal relationships, perhaps with our clinical colleagues, with forensics, with the other, what we used to call divisions, so that we're doing the same job from a slightly different angle, and the public can understand that. That seems important to me. So the evolution, in a sense, is the fruition of the whole point of the exercise. We didn't begin in order to be rebels. We began in order to be a mature contribution to the field. And I feel the division's ready to do that now.
I think the biggest achievement of the division has probably been making clear that intersubjectivity, the central humanity of the person, and the philosophical underpinning to counselling psychology is central to applied psychology. The very fact that the other divisions and the other forms of psychology have taken that up, in a sense, means that we've won that argument. And it was an argument originally. It was a really sort of vociferous debate and discussion about whether or not those things should be part of the science of psychology, and now those things are really unquestioned.
The biggest achievement is survival. That really has counted, because to begin with there was this terrible struggle to be recognised, then to be respected, and then to respect ourselves, sometimes against the odds. So that seems to me to be an important achievement, but I think the achievement's gone beyond that, and it's gone, the most exciting area for me, it's gone into the area of research that matters, instead of the introspection, which I think perhaps in the past we have overdone to a degree, and now we're facing outwards, we're facing a very troubled world in which psychologists have got something special to say, but we do need to say that in a way that's informed by good, solid, rigorous, studious academic research, be that quantitative or qualitative. And I'm looking forward to a time when research supervisors have perhaps more courage about getting ethical permissions, so that our wonderful students who really want to make a difference, that's why they're doing this, have the chance to say something at the end of their doctorates, and then hopefully on into research in the rest of their careers.
The training routes, the fact that research is now much more integrated into psychotherapy practice or psychological therapy practice. Mm-hmm. There's still a bit of difficulty, I think. You know, people still, when I do a lot of supervision and consultancy, and when I talk to people and I say, okay, when you did that with your client, what was backing that up? What had you read about, or what did you know? What had you tried out? And even if they see themselves as researchers, there's a strange sort of split between their own experience of research and actually how they work with their clients. Mm-hmm. You know, so I find that interesting and a bit strange, really. Just something else I thought of there. Oh yes, the focus on the relationship. This is now generally understood that in all sorts of fields, including medicine, that the most important foundation for any sort of intervention, any sort of psychological intervention, is what's going on between you and the person. Yeah. And I think the fact that we, way back at the beginning in 1994, was that when it was, or even earlier? Well, when I was first involved with counselling psychology, it wasn't a division, but we kept on emphasising the importance of the relationship, not just the transference relationship like the psychoanalyst, not just the alliance, the warm, caring relationship which was being emphasised by the humanists, but what is happening in the relationship and the sense of trust that's important. I do think that's actually been counselling psychologists, counselling psychology's real forte, real strength.
I think there are a lot of competitors in society to be the people who count. I think we are in danger sometimes of seeking popularity, seeking exposure, when a quiet, firm, supported view is what may be necessary. As far as I can see, the contribution of psychology is actually to be anti-intuitive. We do not need to restate what other people are saying all the time as common sense. We need to add the balance and the perspective that a strong scientific, well-researched discipline can do. So I think we need to avoid popularism, and then I think we'll gain that most precious of all qualities, and that is being respected by the society we seek to serve.
How to help individuals when there are so many social problems? I think this is a question for all therapists, really, or perhaps all people in the health professions even. You know, there are social problems out there. There's climate change, which is the big one, but there's also the lack of autonomy, the use of resources so that people are somehow, the people who really need resources are not getting them, the sense of inequality. And one of the things that I think is a big challenge for us is how do we help people with regard to social media? Because my experience is that although it's useful and on the surface gives people a chance to have people in their lives in a sort of virtual way, actually the people who come into my consulting room and my supervisees' consulting rooms, a large proportion come because of problems encountered with regard to social media. And I think we don't talk about that enough. We don't think about it. I think another challenge for counselling psychology, which I haven't seen enough talked about, although Sheila Strawbridge wrote a very good article about it, is that we have gradually got seduced into using diagnosis, even though the BPS itself has been in the larger form. For instance, with ADHD, they have questioned diagnostic categories, and I think that we have to fight very hard not to get pulled into using diagnosis because it's useful in research. It's not useful, really. If it's a myth, it's not useful. And all diagnostic terms are made-up terms that change pretty well with every DSM. They change everything. So how we, as a division, as a speciality, how are we going to face that and tell the truth? There was someone this afternoon talking about telling your truth. The challenges are enormous about things like that. Oh, and medication itself. Where are we with regard to psychoactive medication? How can we really support working so closely with doctors who are prescribing when we already, I mean, just recently there was some very interesting literature about the placebo effect. Well, the placebo effect in a way makes a question out of all psychoactive medication. So I think we've got lots of interesting things we could tackle, have a stand on, and at the same time get better known to the public, because we are on their side more than they often feel psychological therapists are. I always remember when I was working in a mental hospital, how people told me how they dreaded their therapy session. And I thought, this is so interesting. We think we're offering them, you know, well, in a way, love. And yet there's these people saying they are dreading their therapy session. They've got to undergo therapy. So I think we have a chance to make it clear to the public what psychological therapy involves, that it is an alliance, that it is a relationship, that it is filled with respect, and that people, as Mick was saying this morning, that people are en route to something. If they want to make meaning of their lives, that's what we're here for, to listen to that and to help them make meaning, not to help them fit in with a very sick society.
I think the challenges are twofold. There's challenges which are external to the division and to psychology, so things like climate chaos would be one of the key elements. We're increasingly seeing a more troubling world in which people of any form of diversity, whether it's to do with ethnicity, sexuality, gender, age, doesn't really matter. People are being isolated, ostracised, and we're moving back towards a position where we have in and out groups, them and us, and the sorts of things which led to some of the most tragic parts of human history. And psychology has always attempted to create a bridge between people and to be aware of the context in which people live. So I think the challenge is that sort of slipping back into a very troubled historic period. And I suppose that's reflected within the work of psychologists globally. In terms of counselling psychology specifically, I think the challenge will be in ensuring that we do good practice, which is evidence-based, which holds the person central and which is philosophically based, while not having a sort of, a strange, almost created barrier between us and our colleagues on the basis of a title, that actually we need to work together toward the common good rather than, I suppose, replicating some of those divisions in saying, well, you know, we have a particular title and we're therefore necessarily distinct because of those things. I think we might have things we can bring to the table because of the way we train, but I wouldn't say we were different in kind to our colleagues, or even necessarily different to any great degree.
Focus on practice rather than on academia, which can be useful but shouldn't be central, rather than professionalism in itself. Focus on being a practitioner who supports truth and helps people and is able to question their practice. I think my final message is practice and question your practice.
Many, many things that counselling psychology has done so well over the past 25 years, a quarter of a century, no less. Of all the things it's done, I hope it never, never loses sight of relationality, and particularly of the dignity of the client. In the end, we only exist because of the people we serve. And if we over-professionalize in a way that separates us, we shall have the same fate of politicians, and we will deserve it. So we need to stay in touch with our own humanity, but perhaps most of all with the humanity of our clients, respecting them as fully useful and valuable members of society.
I think we need to work together. I think we need to work together as psychologists, and I think we need to work together as humans, because only in that way will we have positive progress.